Afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. The Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm your moderator, Nathan the Barbarian. Welcome back, and glad to have you. I'm going to introduce our crew today, and then I want to share a milestone with everybody. We hit a milestone with the podcast. All right. So, with no further ado, let me bring everybody on, including myself. There it is. That would be helpful. What's up, everybody? What's up, Phil
Hey,
Heimlich? How are you?
yeah, I'm fine, but I'm a little, honestly, guys, I'm a little nervous here. Last time I was on with you two, you kind of picked on me. You kind of, ganged up on me. Kind of hurt my feelings. I'm as sensitive as the next guy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I promise to not take it easy on you.
I
Iron
was telling my
sharpens
therapist.
iron.
I won't get into that, but go ahead. Yeah.
Iron sharpens iron. You'll be okay. And to my brother in this endeavor, Kevin Aldridge, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. I'm doing good. Look, Phil, we all have our turn in the ring, man. I think last week, you know what I'm saying, they had me up against the ropes, so it just everybody gets
Deservedly
their
so,
man.
by the way.
Don't take it personal.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's helpful. That's very helpful. I need to work through this. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're right. Everyone's going to take their turn with their back against the rope when it comes to hot mic. So,
I just
uh,
have to double my meds for a while. I'll be okay.
you know what? Phil just shared something with me. I didn't notice he is mentioned in the song Goosebumps. There's a song, very, very popular song. My son loves the song. A lot of people like the song. It's with Travis Scott and Kendrick Lamar. They mentioned Heimlich, the Heimlich maneuver. And he brought that to my attention. I'm like, man, that is super cool, man. That is super dope.
You know what I just thought about? If things in this show kind of start slowing down a little bit, you could replace the current theme music with that excerpt from Goosebumps.
Well, only if we have copyright permission. If not, they'll
Oh, is
pull
that
us
how it
off of
works?
YouTube and
Okay.
Facebook.
All right.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
I've
Well,
been there.
as President Trump would say, I'll pay your legal fees.
We're gonna get to that today. Yeah, Trump is pledging to pay a lot of things, so we'll talk about that. And man, there are so many things going on the national level. We could spend the entire show just talking about one of the issues that are happening nationally. But I want to push back a little bit. We're a Cincinnati-based show, and I want to talk about something that's happening in the city of Cincinnati, and it's a bit of a follow-up. We spent some time a couple weeks back talking about this, and this is a question that needs an answer. And the question is real simple. It's after reading this article with Cincinnati.com, what I learned is that there are members of city council and perhaps the mayor that are want to stand pat on the sanctuary city resolution. The issue is, or should the question is that could cost federal funding. We see what Donald Trump and the Trump administration is doing. And so, I've got a very simple question, but it may not be a very simple answer to it. But should the city of Cincinnati give up its sanctuary city status in order to protect federal funding? And this is a question that has to be answered. This is something that is before the city of Cincinnati right now. So I'm thinking, let's have the conversation right here. What do you guys think?
I'll defer to Phil, the former
Oh,
councilman.
well, thank you. Well, I think we need to look at the overall issue of federal funds pouring into cities and states around the country. I don't think any of that money to begin with should be given to cities and states. And here's why: it's fake money. The idea is that the federal government has so much more money than us in Ohio or Cincinnati or whatever it is that we can just give some for whatever we want, with, of course, all the strings attached. Well, the fact is, the state of Ohio, along with most every other state, they have a balanced budget. The federal government is 35 trillion dollars in the hole. So all they're doing when they give money to cities, it's printed money or borrowed money. All right, that's all it is. So I think the whole thing, for any purpose, needs to stop, because it's just our country's being driven into bankruptcy. That's what's going on.
Hmm.
Now, on the other hand, I'll be honest with you, when I was on city council, uh, even though I didn't agree with the federal government's decision to give money, everybody else is getting it. So, for example, when they offered us money to hire a bunch more cops, I was known as the guy who always wanted more cops. I said, "Yeah, let's take it. Let's do it." But but if I had the ability to stop it everywhere, because if we don't take it, somebody else is going to get it. if I had the ability to stop it everywhere, I definitely would. Now, as far as this particular sanctuary cities thing go, I mean, that resolution, as I read it, is really has no substance to it. There's no beef. It's basically just expressing kind of an opinion. Now, I don't know if Trump is actually going to hold those federal funds out because of just expressing a opinion, or is it only where a city doesn't cooperate or law enforcement in the city is directed not to cooperate with ICE? Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what it is. I guess my attitude, given that how dependent we are, unfortunately, on federal funding, that if they have to just cancel the resolution or get rid of it to get millions of dollars, I guess they have to do it. Because I don't like it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I would, Phil's philosophical beliefs about whether or not the city should, whether federal funding should go to cities aside. I think that this is something Cincinnati has to take a serious look at, because they get millions of dollars every year from the federal government that are critical to some of the things that they do, whether that's hiring police officers, or whether that's block grants that go into neighborhoods that do good things and do good projects. I think you have to take a serious look at what would that withdrawal of federal dollars mean for the city of Cincinnati. I mean, Cincinnati is not the type of city that has a sort of a robust income of revenue that's coming in from new businesses and jobs and things of that nature. So every dollar really counts in Cincinnati. And the question is that worth gambling on what is essentially more or less a symbolic resolution? I think, as Phil said, it doesn't really have any teeth. It's nothing more than a declaration of Cincinnati saying that they are welcoming to immigrants. Do you really need that? Right? Like, I mean, you can still be a city that's welcoming to immigrants. I think that people already know what Cincinnati stands for, regardless of that designation. So if it's going to get into a tug of war with Trump over simply having this designation, one has to seriously consider whether it's worth it,
Yeah.
to hang on to that. And what is it really doing? Now, I know there are some who will say, yeah, well, backing off of that status will send some type of message. If you do that, sure, that's one argument. That's one way of looking at it. I don't know that there's any substance to that, really, that's really going to change Cincinnati's philosophy with regard to how welcoming it is to immigrants or anything of that nature. So I definitely think it's something that they have to consider, and it may not be worth it if you're talking about losing millions of dollars. It's going to hurt the city in a lot of other ways for something
Look,
that's
can I
really.
throw in one more thing, Nathan, before you jump in?
Sure,
First
go
of
ahead.
all, as Kevin said, I don't disagree. Oh, these are critical. We need these dollars. Well, guess what? Every single entity in this country, including all the universities, they all need it. They all say the same thing. They are like a junkie that needs their fix. And it's time we got off. We went cold turkey. The whole country, though. And I'll tell you, share an interesting quick anecdote. You guys may remember the name Miles Taylor. He wrote the book Anonymous. He was the guy in the first Trump administration who basically wrote a column in the New York Times and a book about basically that saying we're doing everything we can to stop this guy. Okay, and he eventually disclosed who he was. He was the Homeland Security chief of staff kind of thing. But he and we were speaking at an event one time, and we had lunch after. And I said to him, I said, is Trump, is he smart? And you know what Miles Terry goes? He says, no, he's not smart at all. But he knows how to push the right buttons. He knows where to put the pressure on. And this is a good example of this.
I don't share your philosophy. We talked about this before, Phil. It just seems to be a philosophy with no real positive impact to
Well,
the
what do
people.
you think about the debt? Do you think we should just keep piling 30 other trade? Do you think we should just keep the debt going on and on and on?
I think no, I don't. But I think that we should do a better job of taxing wealth
I agree with that too.
to attack the debt. That's what I think the
I
solution
agree with
should be.
that too, but I think it's both.
And this is a tough one for me because I'm one of those people who believe you should stand on your principles, and I think it is important. I think some symbolism is important depending on the culture and what's going on. I don't doubt for one second that if Cincinnati continues to refer to itself as a sanctuary city, that we will become a target for Donald Trump. The man is that petty. And if you look at what they're doing with the federal government already, under the guise of cutting waste or whatever they want to call it, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I would anticipate that they would come directly at the city of Cincinnati. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one because I mean, do you stand on your principles, whatever that means? To Kevin's point, like how valuable is that?
Let me tell you
Or
how
do
I
you
think we should
do you
stand
do you
on.
keep the federal dollars coming in because that's more critical to services for the citizens of Cincinnati? I almost wish they would put it on the ballot and let the voters decide on some levels. But from reading the Cincinnati.com article, just kind of reading between the lines, it appears to me, and I could be wrong about this, but it appears to me from just the comments that were attributed to the mayor, Aftab Purival, that if push comes to shove, they will do away with the sanctuary designation because they want to
Well, I
protect
think what he said is he
funding.
was referring less to that, and he was referring more to just we'll cooperate with ICE or we'll cooperate with federal authorities, which
Well,
is a little different.
Well, I was referring to a couple of quotes in the article in which he said, "Look,
Oh, okay, all right,
this is
okay,
who
you're
we
right.
are. We're going to stand on this unless we're
Yeah,
forced to do so." And I'm like,
right.
"Forced?" That to me, that sounds like if they say it's this or that, and
Yeah,
that is the funding, then they're going to
right.
yield. And as public servants, that may be the right thing to do. I can't completely argue against that because the funding is critical. If it is critical in a lot of different ways to Cincinnatians. However, I also believe that sometimes you got to fight. Sometimes you got to stand your ground,
You,
but
you know,
You,
you also
you
have
do,
I,
to,
but you
you
gotta
I
got
you
to
think
gotta
advise.
you gotta measure whether what fight is worth it. So when you talk about standing on your principles, I looked at this sanctuary city designation as similarly as if you were to say, "Hey, I'm for black rights," and you go out and get a black rights T-shirt, and you just walk around with black rights across your T-shirt, like it's a symbolic thing. You got your black rights T-shirt on, but even if I didn't have that T-shirt on, it doesn't mean my principles still are not for black rights. So that's why I talk about it being more of a symbolic thing. That's why I'm not a fan of cities trying to do these types of symbolic sort of national things that don't really mean anything. They're like for show. Like that's what this designation is. It's a political move that is done for show. It doesn't mean that Cincinnati's not welcoming to immigrants. It doesn't mean this, that, or the other. It's a political show, plain and simple. And that's what it is. And that's what it was when they passed it. It doesn't mean
okay.
anything
Well, let's
other
try
than
to let's extend it another step. Let's say it comes down to whether we would want to either as citizens or even the government protect uh, immigrants from being arrested. Now, I read an NPR report yesterday which said that of all those migrants that were taken to Guantanamo, 30% had no criminal records. Okay. In other words, this whole idea that, oh, we're just taking the hombres, the gang members, that's a lot of bull. Okay. 30% no. And I would say for my app, who knows what I'll do or anybody would do in a particular circumstance, but I would hope if there was someone I knew who had no criminal record and was just being arrested and to send back to their home country, I would hope that I would give them sanctuary. I would hope, and I think the question I think that is more perhaps important than just this resolution is, so what happens if we get down to that? What happens if the city has to decide, are we going to cooperate in letting these agents arrest people who, other than come in this country, have not broken the law? I don't know. That would I'd have a lot of trouble myself um, agreeing to turn over people like that really have done nothing wrong, at least since they've been here.
Yeah, I got to push back, Kevin, on the idea that this means nothing. I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't think that's completely accurate. You know what I'm saying? In a world in which you see people cracking down on so-called illegal immigrants, I still stand by the notion that you can't be an illegal immigrant in a stolen land. I still can't get past that. But in that world, standing up for what you believe is right, standing on your principles in and of itself, there's a power to it. It sends a message to the rest of the civilized country that we here in Cincinnati know what is right and know what is wrong. And even though there may not be any particular policies that were passed, I think there's a power when you raise your voice at all times, against the tyranny of something that you think is wrong. Right. It's like, and so if city leadership feels like, being a sanctuary city is the right thing to do, then that in and of itself is a powerful statement.
So Nathan,
Right.
so I guess my point is even if Cincinnati rescinds its designation, if we say we're not going to call ourselves a sanctuary city anymore, do you think that means that they're actually not going to still follow the principles that they believe in just simply by rescinding that designation? That's my argument is I don't think anything changes other than losing that designation and title. I don't think people back off of their principles. I don't think they do anything differently. I think what they do is you remove a target from a petty guy who just simply wants to who is simply using this again as he has as a political wedge issue and a reason to take money away. And I
I
just
agree with
think
the
that
second part.
that's to me it's like, okay, so what? We can't call ourselves a sanctuary city. That's not going to change the way that I move or the way that I operate or the principles that I be in. I'm not going to let something so petty that this guy wants to do because again, it's symbolic. It doesn't mean anything. Like that's the thing. I think that's where we're going to differ on this point. You feel like the designation has some sort of meaning that it makes it more real by having that. I'm saying I don't think that it does. And I
So
don't think that it
symbols
did.
have no
I don't
power.
think that it did when they did it. I
Well,
thought it
you're
was
saying that
I
symbols
thought it
have
was
no
a
power.
purely political thing that they did
So you're saying
from the beginning.
you're saying that symbols have no power now. That's the argument you're making.
He's
That
saying this.
symbols have
He's
no
saying
power.
this symbol, not all symbols.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, but I'm making a larger point here.
Not all symbols are equal, though, Nathan. That's the thing. That
that's
is a
completely
point.
subjective, though. So, like
And
for
I'm telling you, in this instance, this is a purely no teeth, no symbol, no real.
do symbols have power? Yes or no?
Well, it depends.
Some symbols have power. Not all symbols
Yeah,
have
it's
power.
yes or no. Either symbols have
No, it's
power
not
No,
a
or
yes
it's
or
not
no
yes or
answer. I'm
no.
not gonna let.
I
I'm
think
not
a
gonna let you.
I think a
That's not a yes or
swastika.
no question.
it is
That's
a
not
very
yes
it's
or no
a very
question.
simple
I think a
question.
swastika has more power than a city council resolution.
Well, it's not about more power. It's that do symbols have
For
power?
example, Elon Musk, who did a Nazi salute, that's a symbol. I think that is unbelievably damaging. And if I could do anything
My
to
argument is not whether there aren't symbols that are more powerful than others. I'm trying to get to the crux of Kevin's argument. And you're saying that this doesn't matter because it's only symbolism. So my question is, do symbols have power? Because if they do, then there's some power in Cincinnati calling itself a sanctuary city. Now, you might subjectively say, well, it doesn't matter that much to me. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact to other people around the
Yeah,
country.
sure, Nathan. I'm not going to go so far as to say that every symbol out there doesn't mean something to somebody. Okay, I'm sure it does. Whoever creates it, it's there. And I'll put it to you like this: if you feel that way, well, first of all, city council voted to do that. They didn't put that up to a vote of the citizenry. And so if you want to make a finer point of it, since the federal dollars that they would be losing would be affecting a lot of people, then let the people vote on whether or not they want to be called a sanctuary city or not, and willing to risk that federal funding. I don't
Well,
think
I said that earlier.
nine people on city council should make that decision with
Well,
so much at stake.
I made that point earlier.
Let's find
Like,
out
hey,
how
I
much.
would love to
Let's
put
find
that.
out how much of a symbol it is to Cincinnati and put it to a vote.
Well, that's what the point I opened up with. I'm like, hey, I
Mhm.
almost feel as if, I would love to see this come before the voters because it's going to impact Cincinnatians the most.
Sure, I'd be
And
for
let us
that.
make a decision about it. But
I'd
the
be for that.
argument that there's no significance whatsoever in Cincinnati calling itself a sanctuary city, I think is false. I think it's completely false. I think in a time in which we see people cracking down on so-called illegals, right, in the way that Trump is doing it with the Trump administration, for blue cities to stand up and say, this is what we stand on, in and of itself is political statement. It's speech. And speech I thought was protected, and speech I thought was powerful, right?
No,
The
it's
city is saying
there's no question that this resolution is protected by the First Amendment. What Kevin's saying is it worth? I mean,
Right.
assume it
well, that's
does
what
have
we're all saying.
okay. Assume it has symbolic value, as you said. The question is that symbolic value worth losing maybe 30, 40
That's
million
the
dollars a
question that
year?
we're
That's the
all trying to
question.
get to. Yeah,
That's the question.
absolutely. That is the question that we're all trying to get at. And that's why I say I'm torn, right? I'm torn. Like, on one hand, I see a value in the city saying we stand on this business. Whether we've got policies in place, we are sending a message to the country that this is what we believe in. There's a power in that. On the other hand, as we've said many times over and over again, you got federal dollars that could be lost. And what's more important?
Well,
It's the
here's the
decision that
thing.
have and city council are gonna have to make.
Here's the thing. You can stand on this principle of, calling ourselves a sanctuary city. You can lose that money. You can have neighborhoods that are going to be hurt, people that are going to be hurt, jobs that are going to be lost. And Donald Trump is still going to do what he's going to do. That's not going to stop him from doing. None of that is going to stop if he does and what he plans on doing. It has, and this is my point, why I say it has no real impact, because it does nothing. It does nothing other than symbolism. It doesn't prevent ICE from coming in and rounding up folks. AFTAB and the city council members are not going to line up police or whatever. And they've already said that if the laws change, they're going to comply with the law. So it doesn't, the designation does nothing. Tell me what it does, Nathan. Tell me what it does, Nathan, other than make you feel good.
Well, it's not about making me feel
well,
good.
that's a priority that Nathan feels good. Let's be honest.
Very cynical. It's not about making me feel good, but I think about other statements. I think about Tommy John and John Carlos with the black fist salute. What did that do?
Not to correct you, but that's Tommy Smith. Tommy John, I believe, was
Tommy
a baseball
Smith
pitcher.
and John
Just
Carlos.
to
Sorry
correct
about
it,
that.
yes.
Yeah, thank you
No
so
problem.
much. What did
Thank
that
you.
do? What did that do? It didn't do anything, but it sent a message that was powerful.
Oh,
right? But what did it do?
It did do something.
What did it do?
It was very influential in fighting racism in sports, because it made people aware. It was
Exactly.
it brought national awareness to a particular cause, much like when in Birmingham, when all those kids that Martin Luther King brought in, they got arrested, not to mention beaten and hosed and everything. That was his whole thing, was to let the rest of the country see what was going on.
Exactly.
And the John Carlos thing. And by the way, I think it's in San Jose. There's a statue, a great statue. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of it, of the two of them, because I think they were San Jose State. But the point is, yeah, that was powerful. That was worth a lot. I don't see this resolution,
but it's in the same
having
spirit.
that impact.
But it's in the same spirit. It's called speech, and those men took a stand.
You're missing the point.
I'm not missing the point.
Nobody's arguing
You're
whether
missing
it's
the
free
point.
speech.
You're missing the point, Phil, and you just made my point, right? Right. So
Not the
in the
same.
moment, a lot of people could look at what Tommy Smith did and Carlos, and they say, "Listen, what are you doing? Why are you causing such a ruckus? It didn't mean
Which
anything."
they did.
But it's all about how other people take it. Those men took a stand on
So
their
you want to know what the difference is, Nathan? What Tommy Smith and those guys did, it was a powerful moment. It was at the Olympics. It was a key thing.
And
it was an action. It was an action of symbol that only impacted Tommy Smith in terms of the consequences of it. And Tommy Smith, who's been to Cincinnati a couple of times and has even talked about all the price that he paid, the steep price that he paid after he did that. You know, nobody else suffered from that action.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I understand your point. You're right. But the point I brought it up is You're absolutely right about that. You're right. He suffered, and in this case, we're talking about a city. That is a
Yeah.
clear difference. But the reason why I brought it up is because you guys keep trying to make the point that symbolism doesn't have any power. And
Didn't say
No,
that.
no,
I
nobody's
just
Didn't say
gave
saying
you
that.
that.
an
We're not
example.
saying that.
Yeah, that's
Said
exactly
I've
what you
No,
said
we're
both
not.
said.
no. I've
That's
said that
exactly
all
what you both
symbols are
said. You
not the
both
same. All
said
symbols are not the same. And I think what
that's
Phil is
exactly
saying,
what
and
you
what I would
changed it
agree
though,
with
Kevin.
is, I'm not gonna sit here and let you compare what Tommy Smith did with a made up sanctuary city designation that city council came up with. They're not the
Are they
same.
both symbolism?
Yes.
For sure.
Thank you.
They're
So
both symbols.
that's the only point I'm trying to make is that when we start the
Okay.
conversation, it seemed
Well,
like Kevin,
they're
you were
not
making a
equal symbols.
point. Kevin, it seemed like you were making a point when we started the conversation that it's only symbolism and symbols don't matter. So now I provided you with example that symbolism can be very powerful.
So let me
It can
clarify.
be
Let me clarify my
can I finish the
statement.
point?
Let
Let
me
me finish the
clarify
point.
my statement.
Symbolism can be very powerful. Symbolism can be catalyzing.
Yes.
Symbolism can be a watershed moment. That is the importance of symbolism. And I think that what not just Cincinnati, what a lot of cities are doing by maintaining their sanctuary city status has the potential to be just as important in this environment as well. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
You know what? You know why I won't, Nathan? Is because, well, here's what I'll say. I don't know how many cities out there have sanctuary city designation. Um, if all of them decide to say, "Hey, we may stand pat and take the bullet or whatever, lose the federal funding or whatever to hold that designation," I might make the argument that a united front will do that.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Can I interject a question? I
Yeah,
love that you just say that. And I agree with you. And how can we get to that point unless cities like Cincinnati stand pat on their
because what
sanctuary city
happens is the
status?
first one that lose their money, everybody else is not going
But
to
that wasn't my question, though,
fall in
Kevin.
line.
That's not my question, though. My question is, how can we get to that hypothetical situation that I agree with you? If more cities stood down and said, look, we are sanctuary cities, that can be powerful. How can we get there if sanctuary cities decide to just bend the knee to Donald Trump? We're never going to get there.
Well, maybe the sanctuary, maybe the mayors of all the sanctuary cities need to get together on a conference call.
But here's another reason that troubles me. And this has to do with Avtab Pureval, because I still believe that Avtab is a good mayor. I think he's good for the city of Cincinnati. And my concern would be is that if they stand pat with this sanctuary city designation, that opens the door for JD Vance's brother to become the mayor. I can see him using that in a campaign against Avtab, right? Oh, here
I
you
can
are.
assure you that
Here-
no
here-
Republican is ever going to be elected mayor of the city of Cincinnati. Just take my
ah,
word
I
for it.
would agree.
you
I
Okay.
know
would
what?
agree.
Somebody
I
said
think
the
there's
same thing
probably
about
very
Donald
little
Trump.
chance of that happening.
Somebody said the same thing about
We used
Donald
to have an
Trump.
expression. The only way as a particular person could lose is if they find a dead girl or a live boy, under his desk, and that's about the same
And you
situation.
know what, Phil? And you know what, Phil? In a normal
What?
world, I would agree with you. But there were a lot of people who thought that Donald Trump could never be elected the first time and
Yeah.
certainly not a second time. I don't take anything for granted these days when it comes to politics, nothing. And so if the city continues with the sanctuary designation and we lose federal funding, that opens the door for JD Vance's brother or somebody else to use that against, Avtab or whoever else to try to get in office. And that concerns me as well. So, like I said, I can see both sides of it. And I wish I was making a decision, but I'm not. And we got some good folks that we elected to be in office on city council and in the mayor's office to make these decisions. And so I'm sure they're going to do what they think is right. That's all I.
If I may, just to our audience,
Sure.
if you're interested in that whole John Carlos thing, Tommy Smith, there's a great documentary on that whole thing. I think it's an ESPN 30 for 30. Strongly recommend it. The interesting thing that Tommy Smith won that race, John Carlos got the bronze, and there was an Australian guy, Peter, I forget his name, who got the silver. And as a result of that, this Australian guy was very impacted and became kind of a spokesperson for the same cause. It's kind of interesting, but it's a really great documentary.
Yeah, yeah. If people really want to, yeah, yeah, I'll check that out for sure. And I got a friend named Dave Zirin who is a writer. He speaks on and writes on the intersection of sports and politics. He's got numerous books and podcasts in which he speaks about and speaks with directly, John Carlos and the sacrifices that they made for people if they want to check that out. So again, it's in city council's hands, it's in AFTAB's hands. I'm sure they're going to do what they think is right. And I agree with Anthony. I agree with what you're saying. It's like, is this the hill to die on? For people who say no, I can't necessarily disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from 100%. Let's move on. So it's just so many different ways we could go with this. But let's we talked about that. Let's talk about Donald Trump has floated a new concept for paying Americans with the savings from the fake federal department of government efficiency, nicknamed DOGE, DOGE. What he is floating is the idea that tax-paying Americans will receive a stimulus check up to $5,000, and they're going to take some of the so-called savings, and I say that in quotes very loosely, that Elon Musk, who in my opinion is a villain, and his group, Doge, are going to be saving Americans. And people are talking about this right now. I'm not sure how realistic this is, but people have been talking about it. I want to get your thoughts about it. Is this a good idea? Straight up, is this a good idea in your opinion?
Just for factual purposes, Trump has been saying and Musk have been saying that they've saved 50 billion. Well, a couple of media sources, NPR and some others, actually looked at the receipts, and it was like it was no more than 15 billion and possibly less. So they're gaslighting this thing. In
Of
either
course they are.
case.
Yeah, that's the thing that you always got to take into account with Donald is how much of what he is saying is actually factual and true. However, I will say this that it's not that I don't think of it as a bad idea. I think it's actually a smart idea for him politically, and also just not a bad idea. I think it's rare when the government takes tax dollars from you. In some cases, maybe uses them badly, acknowledges that, and then turns around and gives you back some of your money. I don't ever think giving taxpayers back some of their money is a bad idea. I always think that's a good idea. And so this notion of if in fact there is all of this government waste and fraud that's there, and Trump is actually talking about giving a portion of that money back to the taxpayers in the form of a stimulus check, I'm all for it. Send me my 5,000, right? Send me mine tomorrow. I mean, I will take it because I think returning money. I never think returning money to taxpayers is a bad idea. Now that this has been shot down, by the Speaker of the House, who said, "Hey, we've got this deficit, and if we find any savings and any of that, it all ought to go back to paying down the debt and all of that." Okay, if you want to argue that, but I don't have a problem with giving a piece back to taxpayers. And the reason why I say it's smart politically for him, because a lot of people even remembered in this election, the last time Donald Trump cut a stimulus check to folks, that curried a lot of favor with a lot of people who still remember that, 4 years later, that they got a stimulus check from him, mainly because he put his name on it. I'm sure he would do the same with this go around as well. So politically, it's smart. For taxpayers, I think it's good to get some money back. But again, I couch that all under the pretext of you just can't believe anything. You can't believe anything this guy says.
Phil, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I don't agree with Kevin that even if they take the actual savings and send it, you see, that's not the thing to look at. The number to look at after everything, as they say, at the end of the day, is what deficit is there during this year of the Trump administration? What is the deficit? Because the thing is, if he goes ahead, which I think they are, with this tax cut, that I'll guarantee you that's going to overwhelm the amount of savings. Okay, overwhelm it. And I believe the thing that I think is the greatest threat to this country, other than losing our democracy, is that debt. That's $35 trillion debt. And Trump added more in 4 years than any other president. And I will bet that if they do that tax cut and they balance that out against these savings, I think it'll blow the deficit wide open. So if the deficit is greater, there's certainly no reason to return money to people, because it's basically fake money.
Yeah, I mean, for me, DOGE is not a real federal department. It's just something that Donald Trump just made up. I mean, could you imagine if Joe Biden, or let's say Kamala Harris, had won and she just made up some federal department and took, let's say, George Soros' son and put him in charge of it and just let him run amok through all the federal agencies, making mistakes. I mean, they're firing nuclear maintenance workers. Oh, my bad. We got to reach out to you again and bring you back. You're firing people in essential positions, and then, oops, my bad, we got to reach out to you, because there's no analysis whatsoever, right? If they were really serious about this, there would be a period of analysis, right, before you start making cuts. Elon Musk is a villain. He's a crook, and history will probably bear me to be true. Just give us some more time. What they're really doing is trying to make tax cuts so they can give tax, or they're trying to cut the federal government so they can give tax cuts to billionaires, which is ridiculous. Like, why would you be cutting 5,000 IRS workers, right? IRS workers who actually work to bring in revenue during tax season? It just don't make any sense. To Kevin's point, I agree with you, bro, on this one. It is good politically, because unfortunately we got some brothers and sisters. That's my expertise. I can't speak for the white folks, but you got a lot of brothers and sisters out there who will fall for it.
I'll take care of that.
You got a lot of brothers and sisters out there who will fall for this, and they'll fall asleep. This is blood money. I keep seeing more and more videos of good, honest, hardworking Americans. And yeah, did they vote for Donald Trump? Yeah. Was it a mistake in my opinion? Yeah, but they don't deserve this. I just watched a video of a guy named Robert McCabe, who young white dude. It's up on Nathan the Barbarian's Facebook page, and he's one of those probationary IRS workers. He voted for Donald Trump. The man was damn near in tears, just lost his job through no fault of his own. So this is blood money. You're trying to make me complicit in your crime. Now, unfortunately, if somebody send you a check, what am I supposed to do? Not cash it? I don't have it like that. If I had it like that, if I had the money to say no to it, I'd say no to it. Take it back. But unfortunately, a lot of people are not there, right? It's a crying shame what they're doing. So politically, it's good for him, because a lot of brothers and sisters are asleep. They're not paying attention. And if they see his name on a $5,000 check, they're going to fall back to sleep again, like we've already seen it. They're not making any savings whatsoever. They're lying to people. And we don't even know what Elon Musk's grand plan is. I have no idea what he is really doing with all of our information. So, I don't want it, even though I need it, if that makes any sense. I don't want it, but do I need it? Yeah, I can use $5K. So I got a daughter in college. I got a son who goes to summer camp. That's expensive. So I don't want it, but do I need it? Yeah, I need it. And it's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah,
I don't trust these guys one bit.
It's a sad statement of affairs, Nathan, because I think, and this is sort of the reality, is that you got a lot of people out there that are struggling, that are hurting, that are trying to make ends meet. Eggs is $8, $9, $10 in some places now. And that's the very real reality. And what people are going to remember is, well, hey, he put $5,000 in my pocket, whether it's fake money or whatever you may call it at an intellectual or higher level of understanding. But the person who's got all of the issues that you've got, is all they're going to remember is, he put money in my pocket. What have the Democrats done? The Democrats ain't put $5,000 in my pocket. And that is what, that is the very real reality. They're not looking at it as like, oh, okay, this is covered for huge tax cuts that millionaires and billionaires are going to get. What they're going to say is, my family is struggling. And when my family was struggling, when these prices was high, he put $5,000 in my pocket. And that's all that folks are going to need to hear. And so I think you could be mad at that, but I think the real part of that that the Democrats and other people in government have got to start looking at is, how do you start coming up with policies that are going to put money in people's pockets, that is going to give them jobs, that are going to make them feel better about their economic situation.
Yeah.
I
The
mean,
feel better
for
part is
many
different.
people, that's what it comes down to. And so Trump, say what you will, he's been smart about delivering that opium to the masses, and if he in fact does do this, uh, get ready, because I think there's going to be another political win for him.
Yeah. Twin says, what's the good advice for the black community? Well, Twin, I gave you already. You should have voted Democrat. You should have voted for Kamala Harris. And then my advice moving forward is to
Yeah.
focus on the midterms and vote Democrat, 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 Democrat. Because, buddy, it's bigger than policies. This is about democracy or no democracy. This is about power, right? And so, yeah, to your point, I mean, Biden did that. Biden did all of that. But people's perception of what he did was different from the reality of it. And that's 40, 50 years of, programming and Fox News and Newsmax and all these podcasts who are pro-conservative, who do a very good job of twisting and contorting the truth to make people essentially vote against their own best interest. And somebody else said let me say one more thing, Phil. Somebody else said, I don't have any sympathy for the people that voted for Trump. Well, I'm different. I have sympathy for those people. Even though you voted for Trump, you got a lot of decent, good people. They're no different from me. They love their families. And unfortunately, due to maybe their family history being Republican or whatever media they listen to, they bought in and voted for the wrong party and the wrong guy. I don't fault those people for being misled. It's very easy for humans to be misled, especially when you're under duress, especially when you're feeling like your life is not what you thought it was going to be. And then somebody comes along and it's Trump and he wears suits and he's a gazillionaire and he's a businessman. And so you fell for it. I don't fault those people per se. But what I want to know is, what are you going to do now? Midterms are coming up.
Yeah, well, I fault those people, and there's a saying that a lot of people have been using in relation to the Trump administration, and the saying is, the cruelty is the point. And that's exactly what in a number of areas that is what is happening. Your example, that's a great example, Nathan, of the IRS worker who just got laid off or fired because he or she voted for Trump. Well, I got to be honest with you, that you I don't have a lot of sympathy for that person. I'll tell you who I have sympathy for, though. I have sympathy for the hundreds of thousands of these federal workers, okay, who are fired just like that. They have families to feed. They need insurance. They have rent or whatever it is. Fired like that. I'm all for, by the way, the concept of going through every single dollar spent by the federal government. I'm 100%, but not the way they're doing it. The way you do it is legally. You come up with all these recommendations, and then you go to Congress. That I have no problem with, but the cruelty. I know it's very easy to basically hurt government workers because everybody hates the people who work for the government. Very easy to do that, but my heart goes out to hundreds of thousands of those people who are suddenly out on the street with almost no warning whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's who my
Hey
heart goes
Phil,
out to.
you make a good point there, and I think one of the reasons why people, and maybe even some people who are on the right, who are okay with this Elon Musk thing, and I don't think as many people are okay with it as you might think. I mean, if you look at some of the polling, and we can talk about this a little bit later on, because Terrace did get this off in one of the last podcasts, and I didn't have a chance to challenge him on it about Trump's approval rating in the polls, but it's not what it once was after like that first week. After the first month, he's underwater in pretty much every category in terms of his approval ratings and how Americans feel about what he's doing. But to your point about there's a right way to do it, to go line by line and things of that nature. Part of why you get Trump and Elon Musk is basically the fact that we have had a do nothing Congress for decades. These same things that we talk about, the national debt, immigration, all of these issues. We've had a do nothing Congress that has done nothing for decades. And people are looking at it and they're like, hey, man, this ain't been working. Suggesting that people do things the right way and do it legally. They haven't been doing it. And why haven't they been doing it? There's no good excuse for why they haven't been doing it other than it serves their individual political purposes to keep government gridlocked and to stay in their unterm limited positions, right? And so people are frustrated with that. So then when you get a disruptor like Donald Trump or Elon Musk, it makes it easier because they're like, well, we're going to do what Congress refuses to do or has been unable to do for decades. And so people are looking at that and they're like, well, we're just glad that even if it's a Bond villain, we're just glad to have somebody who is purporting to go in there and tear up these agencies and look at the fact that we know is there, that Congress doesn't have the guts or the political will to do anything about. And that's how you get a degree of permissiveness for this Elon Musk type stuff, because if Congress had been doing its job for decades, looking at these things, doing what you suggested, following things the right way, I don't think we would be having this conversation right now. But they haven't, and their inaction opened the door for what we're seeing right now.
Well, I would say it's not just their inaction, but it's also the cowardice of people in my party, the Republican Party, who know better, especially like on this Ukraine issue and other things. These guys, they know better, but they're just cowards. They're out and out cowards. And I think you guys probably saw, there was a tweet that Trump sent out, which I believe is a quote from Napoleon. What he said is something, he said, a leader,
a man who loves his company.
A leader who saves his country does not violate any laws. Okay, hey guys, that's just a message to let everybody know. Hey, look, we're changing things around here. We're not going to do this election thing and this. We're not doing it. We're doing it a different way.
Could you imagine if Biden or Kamala Harris said that, or Obama said that?
Oh,
man, these guys would have, I don't know, did something like storm the Capitol, right? They would have hit the roof. And it's just amazing the double standard that we see that Donald Trump is allowed to exist in. But I'll take it a step further, Kevin. I agree with everything you said, but I think that's part of the plot. I think you've had at least one side of the aisle, that'd be the Republicans, that have been with a lot of intentionality, basically trying to shut everything down. I don't think they have really, for the last decade or so, at least, probably longer, have wanted government to work effectively. So we could get to this moment, so we could see a Trump or an Elon do exactly this. So we didn't just happen to get to this point. I think it's been manufactured by the Republican Party for a long, long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was a part of the Project 2025 plot that they've had for a long, long time, right? Right? When Obama was in office and would try to do things, what did the Republican Party do? They try to be a stopgap at every level. No, 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 no. When Biden said, look, let's work with the Republicans and try to do a border bill, no, 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 no. Why? So that they can come back and say government isn't working for you and that we are the only ones that can save you, right? And I can see right through this plot. So 5K. So the check comes in the mail. We all spending it. Is that what it's come down to?
Hey, bro, I ain't gonna lie. They send me. It's not gonna get my vote.
Exactly.
But I will deposit it.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, I would hope you would give it to the Little Sisters of the Poor.
That's
not
me.
Just
I'm
greedily spend
Little
it
Brothers of the Poor.
On your own needs.
Yeah. I'm just not in a position to say no. I'm just not in a position to say no to 5K. And there's a part of me that really hates that. I hate that, because if I was, I'd just give it to some charitable organization, whatever. But I like what you said. Yeah, you're gonna take the money, but you're not getting my vote. And I wish that people had that attitude, like, oh, you want to play this game? Yeah, send me a check. I'm still voting Democrat down the line. That would be my attitude. People have to make their own decision about what they feel comfortable with. So.
And some people did that with the last stimulus check he sent out. I mean, that, a lot of people had that attitude. Some people did give it to charitable organizations or do whatever. I mean, do you? As I started out my comments, is that, the government takes a lot out of each of our paychecks every week. And if the government is going to give me back some of my money that they've taken from me, because I believe I know how to spend my money better than the government does, whether that's on myself or whether that's giving it to a charitable organization or something that I want to support, then I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to use it regardless of who gives it to me. Joe Biden had cut the check, or Kamala Harris, I would take it and do with it what I would. And I think other people should do the same. Because
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know what everybody else's paycheck look like when they get their paycheck, but Uncle Sam get a pretty good percentage of my earnings. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna give it to me, I'm gonna take it back.
Yeah, a lot of people. Let's move on here. And Phil, you kind of took us there with Donald Trump. I want to share this with you. This was this image right here is sort of AI manufactured. It was doctored up to look like it was the cover of Time magazine, and it was shared on an official account per the White House, an official government White House account. And essentially, it depicts Donald Trump as a king, which has had a lot of people talking about it. Like on one hand, people are justifiably, I believe, saying, "Look, you're going too far. You're not a king. We were afraid of this. You're not an imperial president. None of that." On the other hand, you've got Donald Trump supporters who are mixed. Some of them are saying, he got you again. This is just a joke. He's trolling you." And then some are saying, "Hey, a president is like a king." I want to get your thoughts about the White House sharing this image. Is this something that should be? Is this nothing? Is this no big deal? No. Or
No,
is this
it's a
harmless
big
or a
deal.
sign of bad things?
It's
It,
everything
it's a
that you just said, Nathan. I absolutely think it's 100% trolling. Like that's what Donald Trump does. I mean, if you look at a lot, he is the ultimate troll. He's the troll in chief, is what he is. And he totally gets off on doing this sort of thing because he knows it's going to drive liberals crazy. He knows it's going to drive the media crazy, that people are going to be talking about it. And again, Donald Trump is one of those guys who thinks there's no such thing as bad press. Now, at the same time, while he's trolling, I also think these are kind of soft or not so soft rollouts of ideas for him kind of testing the waters to see what the public reaction to it is going to be. I certainly think Donald Trump does think of himself as a king, regardless of whether that's true or not. I think that's how he sees it. And I think he's going to continue to push the envelope of his authority, what he can get away with. He's going to continue to test institutions, prove him wrong in court, see how far he can go, and see what he can get away with. And he continues to, this is floated under the radar too, but he continues to sort of talk about in the background having a third term, even though that's unconstitutional. So that's background music as he's trolling you with "Long Live the King." So I think it's everything that you said. I think it's trolling. I think it's serious. I think it's all of those things.
Mhm.
It's not. By the way, it's not just background. The other day at that CPAC conference, which uses the term conservative, I don't believe they live up to it. They're just basically a bunch of pro Trump people. But Steve Bannon brought it up, and he wasn't kidding about it. About a third. What do you guys think about a third term for Trump? And everybody went crazy and applauded. So yeah, this isn't just he's not just joking around here. In my view, if he's alive and not completely senile in 2028, he's going to stay there. Okay, whether he does it by just violating the Constitution, declaring martial law, whatever the heck it is, he'll do something. He learned his lesson. Okay, I mean, if he was willing to incite a violent attack on our country and on the Capitol, you think and you think he's going to allow any if he's alive allow anybody else to take his place? I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Meanwhile, it's been reported that DOGE, again, which is not a federal agency of any kind, fired scientists that were looking into the bird flu at a time in which the bird flu is a real issue. You've got inflation rising. You've got a lot of instability in terms of the markets. A lot of people are unsure, and this guy is playing games and trolling. So I think you both are spot on. Yeah, it's all of that. Like Kevin said, yeah, it's trolling, but he's also testing the waters. How are they going to respond to this? I have no doubt about it. If Donald Trump could get it off, he would get it off. If he can get off a third or fourth term, he would do it. No doubt about it. He would definitely do it. which is part of the reason why I didn't vote for this creep, because he's a con artist criminal. And I thought that the American people deserve better. So I think that you're going to see a lot of little things like this, and take them as they are. Some people say these are little things. I think that sometimes little things turn into big things. And could you imagine? Could you
Well,
imagine
I'll
if
tell you a
Joe
big.
Biden did this, or Kamala Harris did this, or Barack Obama, the black guy, did this? OMG. We would have had a civil war just off of this. It would have been a constitutional crisis.
And by the way, Nathan,
They would have
it's not
impeached
just
They
little
would have
It
tried
things
would
to
have been
because
impeach
impeached.
Obama over that. If
Absolutely.
Obama had done something like that,
right,
there would be impeachment. There would be impeachment proceedings going on right now.
Hey, let me share this with you real quick. So on my Facebook page, Nathan the Barbarian, I shared that post, kind of talking about it, and I was surprised to see that this man right here, he responded and saying, if you loosely translate president to a different language, then king would be synonymous term for president. He tells me I'm getting my pennies in a bunch over semantics. So that just goes to show you that there are supporters. Yeah, he is a king. Yeah, they're willing to go with it.
People who say that type of stuff and who look for that are ignorant, right? Who was it that somebody said, and this is why it's dangerous? Who I think Nat Turner said, P.T. Barnum said, nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American people. The ignorance is nothing new, and that type of comment is emblematic of that comment right there.
Yeah,
Is that America was formed because we wanted to get out from under the unfair and unjust rule of a monarch, right? We went away from that. And even when even when the people wanted to anoint George Washington, what, president for life after his term, George Washington turned it down and said, no, that's not what the United States of America is. So that type of statement is not only ignorant to quote unquote semantics, but it's ignorant to history, to the history of this country, why it was formed, and the intent of it. And so I think that is one of the most un-American sentiments that you can hang on to, is this notion of wanting to have some type of king in this country.
yeah.
People need to start calling that out for exactly what it is. That type of thought and mentality is un-American,
Oh,
plain and simple.
absolutely. And this man is probably a voter.
you, well, what this gentleman who said something, oh, don't get in a big deal about it. It's just a, what did he
Yeah.
say? Don't get your panties in a bunch over this. Well, I'll tell you something that I wonder what this gentleman, this person who wrote, would say. Okay, if you want to take something that's definitely not in the background, he is basically turning his back on our democratic allies in Europe that under a system that has worked for what, 85 years. It's kept peace in this world. Okay, he is leaving that. There's no question. He does not want to be aligned with those democracies. He wants to be aligned with Putin. That's what's happening,
Right.
and that's not symbolic. That's exactly what's happening. And even some of the frankly cowardly senators in were at least able to speak up and say, no, 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 no. Ukraine did not start the war, and Vladimir Putin is not somebody we want to do business with.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And again, we kind of talked about this last week. That whole conversation about, NATO, paying their fair share, in my opinion, is nothing more for a rationale, an excuse to pull out of NATO, right? For years and years and years, you had a lot of NATO companies and countries that never hit 2%. Now, all of a sudden, Donald Trump wants 5%. If they hit 5%, he say he wants 9%, because it's not really about recouping money for or making Europe pay for its own defense. It's about coming up with any rationale he can as an excuse to pull out of NATO. In my opinion, people have to read it for themselves and look into it. But we are living in different days. We're living in different days for sure, for sure. Um. Uh. Wow. I mean, anything else on that topic, guys?
Well, I think the fact that they just confirmed Kash Patel as FBI director. Let me tell you something. If you are concerned about civil liberties and the rule of law, you ought to be much more concerned, because this is the most outrageous thing you can imagine. Putting a guy who basically is not only unqualified, but a guy he said he wants the FBI to go after Trump's enemies. I mean, he said this, and yet they have made this guy the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay, that's no symbol there. That is basically letting the word out that if you're an enemy of Donald Trump, hey, we're coming after you. We're letting the 1,500 guys who attacked the Capitol, and engaged in sedition, we're letting them go. But we're coming after. If you don't support our president, we're coming
Oh,
after
absolutely.
you.
I read something that suggested that the DOJ has a new priority, and it's not domestic white terrorism, right? It's not the people that pulled off January 6th, or even the people that were in that bridge in the Woodlawn Lincoln Heights area. They want to go after Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I'm like, huh?
Mhm.
So to all my pro-black brothers that don't vote because it's a business decision and you bliggity bliggity black, okay. Look, let's see what Cash Patel does. Let's see what he does.
One thing we haven't talked about, I don't think we've talked about the dismissal of the Adams case, I think,
We
in
have
this
not in
podcast,
any
have we?
length. We've touched around it.
I mean, this is this ends since Watergate, the separation of the Justice Department and the FBI from the White House. That's over. Okay, this is a guy who there was very, very strong evidence that he was taking bribes from Turkey. I mean, didn't look to me like a close case. All right, and I thought it was a great example of courage. Do you realize that the woman who was the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, who was a Federalist Society member, very conservative. I think clerked for the guy who died, the very conservative
Yeah.
Supreme Court Justice
Yeah.
Scalia. Okay, she resigned, and a bunch of other people did too, because they refused to participate in dismissing this case for political reasons. And the interesting thing is Bove, who's the acting attorney general, he basically couldn't get anybody in the Justice Department to sign that dismissal. A bunch of them all quit, which I give those guys tremendous credit for. It's not so easy to walk away from that kind of job, but they had the courage to do it. And so Bove himself had to sign the papers and go into court. And basically, he tried to say, oh, there's no quid pro quo, but it's come out. It's clearly, in fact, Adams was on, I think, Fox and
I did
Friends.
see
I don't know
some
if you
of it.
guys saw that. He was on there with Holman, the
Yeah.
immigration czar. Basically, I mean, Holman made him look like a fool. Basically, he said, you don't do what we say, I'm coming after you. I'm going to be up your ass, or whatever he said. Okay? This is the end of the rule of law. This is the end of it. It's
And Phil,
over.
you made this point before, but talk about why that's a problem. Like they're recommending that the charges be dismissed with prejudice, and that comes without prejudice,
Without
and that
prejudice.
comes with strings attached.
Yeah, and you know why that is? So that way they
Right.
hold it over his head for the next number of
So
years.
it's like, hey, listen, if you get out of line, we got these charges. I mean, how are people sitting back thinking this is okay? I mean, we are living in different days.
Yeah,
We are
and-
so different
because
days.
it benefits their side and it benefits their guy. And I think that's really what it's all about. Where, you know, Trump's greatest win, perhaps, and the Democrats' greatest failure is making it about him. And what he has been able to do by making it about him is that everything is a personal attack against him, regardless of the validity of the case. And people have gotten so caught up in their tribalism of defending him that by proxy you wind up signing off on a lot of activities that he does, even if you don't agree with them, at the expense of having to criticize the man. And I think that I see this just in every single case, because what are the MAGA's responses? Trump derangement syndrome. It never is any type of answer or address to the issue that you are bringing up. It's always about the man. And that's how Trump likes it. Trump likes it that way. He doesn't care. As long as you're talking about him, he's winning. And that is I think that is where he has been successful in making everything about him, because then he's able to condense it down to hey, this is just politics. This is just another political attack for me. They don't want, and then he equates him to them. He does that very skillfully. They don't want you to win, and by attacking me, they're attacking you. It's very skillful what he's done, and you got to pay attention to how people react to it. That's why they're inoculated to whatever you want to bring up, and I think Democrats, perhaps to their detriment in this last campaign, tried to make it about they really thought that, hey, if we make this campaign about him, then we'll win. They tried it and they didn't. And I think as long as the argument continues to be about him until he crosses a line, and by then it may be too late, until he crosses a line that really is so extreme that it really gets people's attention. And like I said, by that point, it might already be too late. I think you got to change up the strategy, because the Trump attack Trump strategy ain't working. Not going to work.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked.
I don't know if I share that view in terms of Kamala
You don't
Harris.
have to share it. You just got to look at the results.
Yeah, but the results don't really tell me what I'm looking for. Like, I don't remember that. Like, even during the debates and during the campaign, I remember Kamala Harris trying to pivot and say this is about the American people over and over again. But when you're dealing with somebody like Trump, who's putting on a circus every single day, it's almost impossible for reporters to not ask her about what was being said. I remember those points many times, but we can go back and relitigate and do a forensic investigation as to what happened. I think it's a lot of different things to it, but very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what that means for New York. Like, what is Trump going to make Eric Adams do, right? What does that mean exactly? And is that going to be good or bad for people that live in the state of New York?
Well, speaking of New York, this whole thing about him getting rid of the congestion pricing, which sounds, so what's the big deal? Well, think about this. New York, I mean, they spent years and years putting the system in place, whether you agree with it or not. Years implemented in one, at least he's trying to, in 1 second, millions of all out the window. And the fact of the matter is, we as Republicans are supposed to believe in local government. We're not supposed to believe in the heavy hand of the federal government. But that's exactly what he's doing. And if people were real, what I call Republicans, are real limited government people, they would say, hey, I may not like that thing, but that's what they want to do. Let's stay out of it.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because I've made the same observation about Republicans. Like, I thought that you were against, the heavy hand, as you put it, the best way of the federal government. What about local rule?
Yeah, only when it's convenient.
We see the same thing happen with Republicans in the state of Ohio here, which I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time talking about the things they're doing as well. It's the same deal. And I'm like, wait a minute. So when you guys get in power, you basically are hypocrites. You're going against all your principles. So again, we're living in amazing times. We're living in amazing times.
Remember this statement, and you'll never go wrong. The essence of politics is hypocrisy, and that's a fact.
That's like words from that is like words coming down from Mount Sinai. I mean,
If you never forget that, you'll never be surprised by it. The essence of politics is hypocrisy.
But I would say the same thing about human nature, though. I mean, the essence of human nature is hypocrisy, right? We're all hypocritical creatures. Let's be real here. We say one thing and do another on so many different levels.
But politicians are a specific. They're a specific type of hypocrite.
Maybe so. I can't disagree with that. Guys, that's all I got. I mean, it's going to be a short show today, in and out. As we always do at the end of the show, I mean, is there anything that maybe you didn't get a chance to get in, or something that was said? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind is I kind of feel good about myself that I'm not trying to boast, but that I am not a team player. I am not a team player. See, we have too many team players in this country, in our government. In other words, they're on the Republican team and they're always going to vote that way, or the Democrat team, or the liberal, or the conservative. And to me, we don't need team players. We need people who are going to act on their conscience and act on the facts. And sadly, people like Mitch McConnell, who could have gotten rid of Donald Trump if he had encouraged people to vote to convict him after the attack on the Capitol, all the others would have followed along. But he was too much of a team player. And that is the thing that and the Democrats have done it to some extent. I was so angry when there was one of the Republicans who voted in the House to impeach Trump. Well, do you know what the Democrats in Michigan, Peter Meyer, the Democrats in Michigan put money behind a pro-Trump guy in the Republican primary, so he'd win and then he'd beat Meyer. Okay, to me that is just plain unpatriotic. I think it's time we started putting country first and then our team second or
Did
our
it
party
work in
second.
Michigan though? Did that ploy? Well, then it worked.
Yes,
Then that's
yes.
politics, right?
Yeah, but it's just I'm trying to say it's wrong. This guy was a courageous guy, a Republican in a swing state who voted to impeach Donald Trump. People on the Democrat side, even if maybe they're not going to endorse him, but to purposely fund a pro-Trump guy to win the Republican primary to get rid of this courageous guy, they're team players,
In
and that
that
makes
case,
me
I'm okay
sick.
with it because the Democrat won, right? Yeah. Oh, and
Yes,
then
I believe
that's
so.
politics. You might say
Well,
it's
Yeah,
dirty.
it
Ain't
is
cutthroat, but
politics,
that's
but
politics.
it's politics, but that's what I say. Like that's the problem. That's the problem with politics. To maybe piggyback on Phil's point is that the gamesmanship, the win at all costs nature of what politics has become is not about what is in the best interest of the American people. It's about what's in the best interest of the party politic. So and this is the argument that I think eventually comes back to bite you. So if I'm a Democrat and I say Donald Trump and MAGA is an existential threat to the democracy, right? And then I turn around and I'm secretly behind the scenes advocating for a MAGA candidate to run against a more reasonable Republican candidate so that I can get that guy because I think he's easier to beat, then that becomes part of the cynicism that the public develops in that, well, how real do you think the existential threat is because you over here supporting this guy, helping him get in because you're so sure that you can win? Well, what if you don't win? What if the vote don't go your way? Even though it probably won't because of gerrymandering or a whole bunch of other situations. But it's that type of action that leads to the cynicism that some voters develop or those who are paying attention develop that makes it say, well, how much of a threat is it really? Because if the MAGA guy was really a threat, then let the conservative go ahead and beat him, maybe get him out of the way, so that he's not even a threat that stands a chance in an election against you. So I think that while it might be good politics, it might be good gamesmanship, it may not be good for the country overall in the end. And I, not to put words in Phil's mouth, but maybe that was the point he was trying to express.
No, I hear all that, but this is chess, not checkers. And so the Republicans do the same thing. They do the same thing. They try to do what they can to influence the primary to get the result that they want in the general election. This is just
Yeah, I
everyday
mean,
politics.
I'm not saying
But I think, Kevin,
I'm not casting
is people
aspersions
like
on.
you
I'm
and
not
I.
casting aspersions on either party.
Yeah. But what I'm saying
Either
is people
side
like you and
does it,
I have
but
to explain that to
the
people so
question
people
we got to
understand.
ask ourselves as voters, as people, is this the type of politics, regardless of whether you're Republican or Democrat, is this the type of win at all cost politics that we want to continue to have in our country? Because if it's win at all cost politics and anything goes, and it's like, oh, well, this side is going to do it, so we're going to do it too. Like, is that the type of politics that we want to have in America? And that's up to the people to decide.
Yeah.
That, not the politicians.
But it's also up to people like you and me that can explain this to people to make them understand why this is happening, right? So I don't know. I don't know about the particular politics of these individuals. What I would say right now, as I look at the modern day Republican Party, this ain't the old school Republican Party. These people are completely different. And so if the Democrats have to play some gamesmanship during the primary system to get the result they want in the general election, based upon what I see from the modern day Republican Party, I'm all for it 100%. 100%. Right? If this was 30, 40 years ago, I might feel differently. But this is the modern day MAGA party, right? And so if we keep looking at them and trying to address them the way we used to with the good old days, we're going to keep losing. These people
No,
are a threat.
here's what I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this. And I get, look, first thing we got to do is we got to figure out a way to fix gerrymandering in across the board to come up with new ways of electing candidates that is less about protecting incumbency and all of that, but creating real competitive districts where people have to listen to their constituents and not simply blow off what people are saying because they don't have to worry about a general election. All they got to worry about is a primary. So we got to fix that first and foremost.
We tried to do that in Ohio with issue 1, remember?
Yeah. And maybe it's a matter of coming up, issue 1 may not have been the best system or the way. That doesn't mean that we abandon the pursuit of that. Like sometimes there's okay, issue 1 may not have been the best way to deal with that, but it doesn't mean, if there's one thing that we know across the board, regardless, is that Ohioans think gerrymandering, by a large percentage, think gerrymandering is a bad idea, and they don't want it. So the key is coming up with a process that's going to end it. So no one should drop that ball and say just because issue 1 lost that voters don't care anything about gerrymandering. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Voters across the board care about gerrymandering. They also care about the process by which we come up with to end it. And so clearly that wasn't.
But let me interject something. So we're having this conversation about gamesmanship, right? So let's talk about Ohio. Look at what the Republicans did when it came to issue 1. They changed the ballot language to confuse people. Now, is that fair? Was that right? No. But they're in control, and they use their power to play the game to try to influence the election, and it worked. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are confused about it when you look at the ballot language, right? But that's what I'm saying. That's what we're up against.
And that's the type of stuff as voters that we should reject. So if you as a voter, Republican or Democrat, if you think creating ballot language that is not clear and is intended to confuse voters is wrong, that should be something that we agree about across the board, whether we're Republicans or Democrats. So as voters, as citizens of Ohio, we need to step up and say, not just because your side got the result that it wanted, because next time it may not be your side. It might be the Democrats that do it. This is what I'm saying, is that as voters, we have to stand up and say, this is not acceptable, regardless of whether we're on the prevailing side or not. We want a fair vetting of the ideas. We want clear, and may the best man, may the best person win, right? I think Democrats find themselves in the position that they're in, and we can come up with all kinds of excuses of why Kamala Harris lost and this, that, or the other. But I always believe that in any debate, the side that makes the more influential case, that makes the better argument, wins the debate. And I've heard Republicans say this in Ohio, and I think it's probably true to a large degree, even with the gerrymandering, is that if you have the right arguments, if you make a compelling argument, then you'll win the debate.
No, not in this ecosystem where you've got heavily gerrymandered districts and then heavily gerrymandered media ecosystems. No, not in this system, because you got a lot of people who might be swayed by a good argument, but they're not going to hear it. They're not going to hear it.
So why are they not hearing it?
Because the media that they choose to partake in is not going to tell them that.
And so think about this. This is part of the gamesmanship, because I see this too. Is politicians on both sides of the aisle. They pick the media organizations and the platforms and the formats where they're comfortable with. Now, I'll give Pete Buttigieg some credit. He was a guy who was unafraid to go on Fox News and argue liberal points of view. He walked into the lion's den.
Oh, he's good at that. He's real good at that.
How many liberal politicians do that? How many liberal politicians make themselves available, let Fox News know, hey, I'm willing to come on. I'm willing to debate these ideas. Or all of them going to MSNBC and preaching to the choir? How many? We know we see this a lot on the Republican side, and I know I see it in the media a lot, that a lot of Republicans duck what they consider to be sort of liberal media, and they stay in their friendly echo chambers. And again, I think this is something that the public should demand. The public should demand a fair vetting or equal time of both sides. I want to hear, like, that's the whole point of why we do this podcast, because we want people who come on here to hear from Kevin Gordon, and Kevin Gordon have to answer questions that the viewers on this podcast want to hear him answer. And likewise, you and me, or Phil, or whoever else we have on the podcast, the diverse points of view give people an opportunity to hear all sides of the argument. So if you come here, you're going to get a variety of views. Some you're going to like hearing, some you're not going to like hearing. But you're going to at least get to hear it. You're going to get to ask the questions. You're going to get to say that's BS. I don't agree with it. Whatever. We get to read that stuff in the comments. There's an exchanging of ideas. And so.
But you also overlooking the suppression. So, for instance, let's say you get an Ohio congressman, right, that goes on Fox News and he does a 10-minute interview. That doesn't mean that everybody on Fox News is going to see that 10-minute interview, right?
Sure.
That person's going to be drowned out by the 24-hour news cycle, right?
Right.
It's up to Fox News to decide what they put on their YouTube channel and how much they put on a YouTube channel. But what I've seen from them is they might put a clip, a 30 seconds or 40 seconds or 2 or 3 minutes of the particular interview on their YouTube channel, but it'll be because something happens in those moments, right, that supports their side or makes that particular person look bad, man. I'm just saying, I hear what you're saying, but until people rise up and we make these changes and we overturn Citizens United, these Democrats got to do what they got to do. Republicans got to do what they got to do to try to get elected. And it's not always, to your point, to the betterment of the people. But that's just where we are. We live in a very savage political system right now. And I see Democrats and others just trying to do whatever they can just to survive. You know, they're hanging on to the end, they're hanging on to a life preserver, just trying to keep from drowning in some cases. And that's just where they are.
The thing that I don't like about that thought process, Nathan, is that it takes the power out of the individual person's hands and it puts it in the hands of the media. It puts it in the hands of the politician. It puts it in the hands of all of these other folks when the power exists with the people. The people have abdicated their power because they have that mentality that nothing I'm going to do, that the system is more powerful than I am. And I'm going to tell you right now that is an absolute fallacy, right? It is an absolute fallacy because every system has to respond to their customer base. So we've talked about this with like boycotts, like, hey, I got the right to go spend my money with whoever. And if you do something that I don't like, then I have the ability to withdraw my money from that. And I've seen this in practice. The whole reason that journalism switched during the yellow journalism era, where there were no standards, people were making up stories, doing all types of crazy stuff, was because the public rose up and said, this is no longer acceptable. And they did it in such large numbers that it's no longer acceptable that we're going to allow you to do that. And so the New York Times came along and they developed all of these ethical standards that we operate under today as a result of the public standing up and saying, no more of this fake stuff that y'all are doing. And there are many other instances that I could point to where when people have made it their mind to stand up and say, if you don't change, we're serious about how this is going to impact your business, how this is going to impact your career, how this is going to impact your politics. Change will happen. But as long as people sit back and they just like, you know what, this is how it is, this is what the ecosystem is, and you can't fight that, then you're right. You're never going to overcome it. And that's why I say that we have to decide. People have to decide. what they want and what is acceptable. And if you don't like it, you just can't sit back in the cut and complain about it. You've got to lift your voice up. You've got to do something. You've got to let it be known that we are not going to tolerate this anymore. If you sit back, if you think the ecosystem and the powers that be really have all the control, then you're right. You have zero.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I hope that people do rise up. And I saw an interview. No, I saw the video of a congressman. We talked about this guy, white guy, Republican. I forget what state, and he was making some sharing some goofy ideas about kids having to work for free lunch. He recently did a town hall, and these red state Republican voters were not happy with his stance on Elon Musk and what's happening with the federal government. So, to your point, perhaps that will happen. And to Nat's point, people haven't felt a lot of pain recently. We've been too comfortable. A lot of people have been way too comfortable. They haven't felt any pain. We're decades away from a hot war, right? Kids haven't, nobody's sons and daughters have been drafted to go to fight and die in some foreign land. So we've forgotten a lot of this. So I don't wish any of that pain back on anybody, but to your point, hopefully we'll reach a critical point where people start to wake up. Phil, anything before you roll out of here?
No, thank you, guys. No.
All right,
I
everybody.
don't think I got a chance to share this anecdote in the last podcast, but I will share it. So my wife and I we went out to a concert last weekend, and when we were at the concert, I won't name this brother because I
was this an acid rock? I know you're a big fan.
Not quite. Because I generally won't name people if I haven't talked to them in advance, so I haven't talked to him. But he listens to the pod, and he pulled me aside as we were coming into the concert venue, and he's like, "Hey man, come on, tell me the truth." He's like, "Are you a Republican? You secretly a Republican, ain't you?" And I'm like, I'm looking at him like, "What? Where does this come from?" And so then he goes on to say, he's like, "Yeah, because you're always on there trying to be the voice of reason." And I'm like, okay, so we chopped it up for a couple more minutes and went on our way. But I left that conversation with two things. One, I got to disassociate myself from Phil and Terrace and Kevin Gore. Like this podcast is impacting my reputation on some level. The fact that I'm friendly with you guys, so I'm gonna have to work on that. The second thing I left that with was that reason is not popular in America these days. Nobody wants to hear reason. Like everybody wants to, they like the conflict. They like the my side versus your side, and like middle ground seems like it is not a popular concept these days. And so that was my takeaway.
Well, as I said when you shared that with me, I've warned you about this. I'll warn you again. You're judged by the company you keep.
Evidently. So I'm gonna come on. I'm changing my name on the screen. I'm gonna put Kev the Barbarian on the screen, and maybe that'll help me out a little bit, or I'll come up with a different. Nate's got the Barbarian cornered. I have to come up with something else that is equally conflict centered, so that I can let them know where I'm at.
Now, was this somebody that you know, or just a
complete friend? No, this is somebody.
Somebody you know. Okay.
This is somebody that I know. Now, I wouldn't say like we're homies or anything like that, but it is somebody that I know, that I've known for a while, that and who's familiar with politics. So that's also something that was kind of surprising.
Well, hey, whoever that is, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
appreciate you.
Sure.
And speaking to that, I've got some good news, a milestone. We reached a milestone on the Hot Mic Podcast HQ YouTube channel. We are over 100 subscribers. So I want to say thank you to all the listeners, people subscribing to us. I don't know what Facebook and Zuckerberg are going to do, but I think YouTube is going to be a stable place for you to find this podcast. So if you haven't already done so, please take a second. If you're a YouTube person, if you're not, I get it. You may not be a YouTube person, but if you are, hit us with a sub. Hit us with a sub, because hopefully, you can get something and you like this show. And we don't have any plans on stopping. We're going to continue into the year, so, and just expand our repertoire of crew members and try to bring in as many diverse people as possible so we can debate and discuss hot topics. With that, gentlemen, have a great day and a great weekend. To all the listeners and supporters and subs, thank you so much. And we're planning to be back with you on Tuesday, right? Tuesday at 1 p.m. We live stream on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you so much for your time, gentlemen, and have a great day.
Thank you.